The Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker is an iconic game from an iconic time period. In a time where everyone wanted a high realism Zelda, Nintendo sucker punched everyone and released the most cartoony entry in the franchise, which clearly has aged like fine wine. But while there are many secrets in this game, today we are covering what you couldn't have missed. After our sister was kidnapped, many things are running through our minds. But other than those thoughts, we need to save her. So we head out on Tetra's ship to the Forsaken Fortress in hopes of finding her. And after we get stuck in a barrel and catapulted into the fortress, I think it's time I tell you what you couldn't have missed. The Forsaken Fortress has searchlights everywhere, but as we all know, all it takes to fool them is a simple barrel and standing still while you're in its line of sight. However, are we really fooling them? Odds are, instead of us fooling them, barrels appearing and disappearing must happen a lot inside the fortress, causing us to be of no alarm to the guards. And the only thing that could possibly mean is that the Forsaken Fortress is haunted by barrel ghosts who constantly appear and disappear at random times. Right as we enter the first room of the Forsaken Fortress, we stumble upon a room with many barrels and a table. While many will just assume these barrels are for storage, utilizing context clues, we can find out that they are empty. This is because with all of the sneaking barrels we find around the Forsaken Fortress, clearly there has to be some place where they manufacture these special grade barrels. This room clearly is the main candidate for this due to the large table for a good workspace and the barrels being taken down and put to the side ready for their modification into sneak barrels. These manufactured barrels, when ready, would have been used by the guards, but proper training for the barrel sneaking hasn't been developed yet for this regimen. Deeper into the Forsaken Fortress, there's a room with a group of bunk beds. While it makes sense that there would be a bear axe, the fact that there's a gargoyle that shoots a laser at any movement it sees feels a little off. But considering this fortress is filled with a bunch of untrustable lackeys, this means that the gargoyle was installed to prevent anyone from getting out of bed late at night and stealing a midnight snack. When being spotted by one of the spotlight bokoblins, even though they have a perfectly placed megaphone on their watch post, they choose to not utilize it and come right after you with their weapons. This is quite a foolish action, however, it helps us delve into the psyche of the Forsaken Fortress lackeys. Clearly they have a massive ego, and when seeing a mere child such as Link, they got ahead of themselves and attacked before reporting him. Right before getting your sword back, if you fall off of this sidle point, Link can push off a wooden crate to unlock a shortcut. However, due to gross negligence, Link breaks the crate, losing out on this amazing shortcut. After our attempt to save our sister in the Forsaken Fortress, we barely make it out alive with the help of a sentient boat. We equip our new companion with a sail and head towards Dragon Roost Island. After hearing of Alu's pain, we do the only thing we can do and head to Dragon Roost Cavern to fix the issue and tell y'all what you couldn't have missed in Dragon Roost Cavern. As soon as we enter the main sanctum, one thing crosses our minds. Why would the Rito live near a clearly active volcano? While many obvious answers can be the lack of land in flooded Hyrule or the fact that they need Valu's scales to grow wings, however the real reason is much more practical. The thermal benefits of having a volcano right next to your home during winter is extraordinary, keeping the Rito's home, the Mail Center, climate controlled to perfection. Deeper into the dungeon, we come across a bokoblin that seems to be alone in a room full of pots. However, after further investigation, we learn that the bokoblin wasn't actually alone and had a few other bokoblin hiding in pots around him. This can mean two things. One, they were playing hide and seek. Or two, which is sadly the more likely option, the main bokoblin in this room is a bully, and the other two were hiding from him to avoid his abuse. The stairs on the side of the cavern are interesting because they fall off when you walk on them but regrow when we come back at a later point. This is actually due to a side vent in the volcano, however, the lava cools before it reaches the exterior, causing the stairs to grow out of the sides for us to climb. As we reach the higher levels of the cavern, we find an oddly placed bird cage that clearly was broken out of. This must have meant that before Ganon controlled Gohma and the Helmrock King, Gohma and the Helmrock King used to be constantly at each other's throats. This was until Gohma captured the Helmrock King. However, due to the king being useful to Ganon, after taming Gohma, he freed the Helmrock King and now utilizes the Helmrock King for his kidnappings. The Gohma fight is a very visually pleasing fight, but however, after we start cracking the exoskeleton, we clearly start to see some cognitive impairment in Gohma's mind. Instead of pushing the rock to the side, Gohma decides to push the rock back up into the tail of Valu just for us to be able to thrust it back down onto Gohma until our entire exoskeleton is broken. This must mean that after Ganon tamed Gohma, she lost all form of logical thought, and after we hit her on the head the first time, that was the straw that broke the camel's back and Goma's mind broke completely. After mingling with Velu's behind, we make a beeline straight to the Forest Haven. Here we learn of the Deku Tree's plight and are given a leaf to aid in our task of saving Makar, who foolishly entered the Forbidden Woods alone. And now we enter the woods, not only to save the little wood guy, but to tell y'all what you couldn't have missed. As we enter the first room of the Forbidden Woods, we stumble upon these eye flowers that we see blocking doors in the dungeon. These eye flowers weirdly are immune to many of our attacks. This is really odd, especially because usually our only option to deter these blockages are the nuts strewn about the dungeon. While many will think it's weird these eye flowers are deterred by such a blunt and non-sharp object, clearly the eye flowers are allergic to nuts, causing such a severe allergic reaction which leads them to death. The deeper we go into the dungeon, we quickly have a terrifying realization. While we all know the Dexy vines are foreshadowing to the boss of the dungeon, these bigger vines that pop up to impede our path are never explored. Clearly they have to be sentient since they react to our presence. So this means that the entire Forbidden Woods is a sentient being, and if it's ever angered, would wreak havoc on Hyrule. The many forms of wildlife in the Forbidden Woods are usually very deadly, but sadly one creature we call enemy is actually a friend. Morth is just a happy little ball of joy latching onto anyone around him for warmth and comfort. However, due to Link being very jumpy and scared of dying with 1 HP, he slaughters Morth, even though Morth just wanted a friend. After obtaining the boss key, Link gets ambushed by a duo of moblins. These clearly were sent out by Ganon to eliminate Link, but how did Ganon know where Link was? The only explanation for this is when Link lost his sword in the Forsaken Fortress, before he was able to get it back, Ganon put a tracking device inside, thus allowing him to track Link's movements all across Hyrule. As we enter the boss room, we come across the exact Korok we are looking for. After we greet him excitedly, we suddenly are surprised by Kala Demos, which ends in Makar's death. With Makar gone and the Forbidden Woods clear, we need to speak to Jaboon. So after stealing some bombs from our old pirate friends, we make it to where it all began and take Jaboon's pearl. This pearl, in unison with the others, leads us to the Tower of the Gods. And today, let's go see what we couldn't have missed. As soon as we enter the Tower of the Gods, we are hit with the first of 2 gimmicks present in this dungeon. Similarly to the most loved feature of the Water Temple in Ocarina of Time, we have raising and lowering water levels. However, this time, they are alternating to a timer. This unique change comes with no explanation. While we can see drains throughout the dungeon and a flow of water in the main sanctum, neither of these have an animation for drainage or an increase in flow. The only explanation for this is Cyclos, as the nuisance he is outside of the Tower of the Gods, using his power of wind to blow water into the temple on a timer. In this room, we need to kill all the Choo-Choos to spawn in a staircase to the top of these platforms. However, unlike other enemy rooms, the door doesn't lock behind us. This must mean that this room doesn't utilize the same mechanisms that many Zelda dungeons utilize. This room actually demonstrates what happens when many Choo-Choos coated in water die in unison. When this is the case, the corpses all amalgamate into a gelatinous looking building material, resulting in the bridge we see here. The Beamos we encounter inside the Tower of the Gods are unique compared to other Zeldas. They are semi-invisible until we get close, and then they attack. This tendency is actually due to the Beamos being extremely shy, and when you get near them, the beam is actually tears, brought about by you making them face their anxiety. The deeper we venture into the Tower of the Gods, we come across the Servants of the Tower. These little statues are here to help us make our way to the top of the Tower of the Gods by any means necessary. However, if we ever make a mistake and drop these little guys into a chasm, for instance, we can usually just find them back on their original pedestal. Though unfortunately, the statue didn't just teleport back. This is actually a newly created statue, which means any mistake you make can end one of these innocent beings' lives. As we enter the boss room of the Tower of the Gods, we come across COULDN. COULDN, when he sees Link, instantly starts dissing him and insulting his demeanor. This quickly ends in COULDN attempting to throw hands at Link in a very unorthodox manner. However, COULDN, while his hands were ready, he was not prepared to catch shots from Link's curved stick with string. We proved our worth against COULDN, allowing us to sink into the sea, retrieving the legendary blade, the Master Sword. With an upgraded sword and strength gained, we are finally up to the task of saving our sister. So after barely making it back into the Forsaken Fortress alive, let's see what you couldn't have missed for the second time. Right as we attempt to breach the main door, we have a startling realization that security has been increased with Phantom Ganon blocking our path. This clearly shows us that Ganondorf has started taking his job way more seriously, probably scrapping the sneak barrel training and putting that budget into general security. However, as usual, Ganondorf doesn't account for Link having his grandma's soup this time, which is why his fortress has been breached multiple times. Soon after initial entry, we come across a horde of mini-blins. Nothing is too interesting about them, but the fact that they never stop spawning, in Ganondorf's fortress specifically, clearly is a metaphor to the endless cycle of Ganon spawning in just to be despawned by Link at the end of each game. Inside the prison Link wasn't locked into, we find a piece of heart in a chest. This is really odd, especially considering the only one who has the say of what gets locked in prisons in the Forsaken Fortress is Ganondorf himself. Drawing a few rational conclusions, we can assume that Ganondorf, after losing his dying piece, lost a piece of his heart, which he locked away, never to be seen again. The Helm Rock King boss fight is one of the most satisfying boss fights in Zelda. Finally taking down the Helm Rock King, which has caused many people of Hyrule so much pain, is a crazy thing to experience. However, this boss fight is an example of hubris in its purest form. The Helm Rock King is seen to puff out his chest throughout the whole fight, demonstrating his excessive pride. This pride culminates in him wanting to show off his excessive strength as well. He does this by pecking Link. But, due to his hubris, he overcompensates and sticks his beak into the ground, which Link exploits promptly. This final cutscene where we see Link standing face to face with Ganondorf and his ship is an iconic moment for many. This is where we learn of Ganon's plans and that the Master Sword lost its power. And while many of you may think I will bring up the question of how Ganon survives at the end of this cutscene, when Valoo burns the ship, however, I think instead of focusing on the ship burning, we should focus on the ship itself. The ship being stuck in an odd place is clearly a reference to Ocarina of Time when a ship was stuck in another odd place, which was the Shadow Temple. With the sudden realization that our sword has been drained of all its power, we learn from the king that we need to awaken the 2 remaining sages to their role in powering the Master Sword. So after hitting the gym, so we can pick up Moai heads, we gain the song to awaken Medley, opening the way to the Earth Temple. The Earth Temple is pretty cool, and today I'm going to tell you what you couldn't have missed. As soon as we enter the temple's main sanctum, we come across a bunch of iconography of skulls seen across the temple. This theme of death is repeated across the temple many times, and clearly is pointing to one thing. While we do see Stalfos around the dungeon, their skull shape is not what the skulls we see on the walls model. This must mean that the skulls on the walls are ancient Stall children that were put here to add to the temple's aesthetic. As we crawl deeper into the Earth Temple, we come across a massive statue with eyes that need sunlight to open. While this set piece, to many, will just be that, a set piece. Clearly the bold design and wicked facial expression represent something deeper. This statue is actually a prophetic statue that shows us how the fairies see Link every time he stuffs them into a bottle. With all the iconography of death, clearly we will see some undead enemies. Well, at this point, we would have already seen Redeads, but in the Mirror Shield room, we run into Stalfos. These enemies are very similar to the guards of Egos Duakana, but since Wind Waker is not in the Majora's Mask timeline, this can't be the truth. These Stalfos clearly are representative of the deep desire of all people to live forever and the lasting consequences of this desire. In the deepest depth of the Earth Temple, we come across a room with tons of mirrors. While in Zelda games past we have had similar puzzles, none have been to the scale seen in the Earth Temple. The metaphors at play here are immense, with light passing from one mirror to another being similar to how we are passing down the duty of being a sage to one person to another. But the ideas at play here is a reflection of what we have seen the whole game, with us pushing past many people to get to our goal, though more specifically when we pushed and bullied Zill on Outset Island. As we reach the boss chamber, we come across a massive Poe named Jalhala. This massive creature is actually a massive group of Poes all grouping up to form this monstrosity of a boss. While many will write off his gluttonous appearance to just being Jalhalla's clumsy amalgamation of the Poes, however, this entire dungeon does anything seem a little weird? Overall, this dungeon seems like one of the most cold dungeons yet, and with many of the enemies being very specifically selected, this can only mean one thing. This dungeon was designed to be Brawlhalla's personal refrigerator, with many delicacies such as pork, jello, and bat all being on the menu for Brawlhalla to feast upon at his leisure. With Medley ascended to Sagehood, we make our way to the Forest Haven. Here we find Makar, which apparently survived the attack from COULDN back in the Forbidden Woods. We play him the Wind God's aria, and after he awakens to his duty, we descend on the Wind Temple. This temple is universally praised for its unique puzzles and engaging design. And today, let's take a dive into a few things that I don't think anyone could miss. As soon as we enter the Wind Temple and take control of Makar, many instantly fall in love with his qualities as a Korok. With his running sound effects, leaf propeller, and Deku Seeds, Makar is a fun little guy to control. However, no matter how cute he may be, we need to respect him. Due to him being able to survive inside of COULDN's belly, Makar must be way more skilled in survival than he lets on. So be wary to ever cross Makar, because his skills in combat are surely greater than yours. In the section of the dungeon where Link needs to utilize heavy machinery to progress to the next room of the temple, he sadly did not follow the worksite procedures. This ended in him receiving a massive injury which required weeks to recover from. Later into the temple we run into a mini-boss, and while many other theorists skip over this fact, today I'm not going to do so. And as weird as it sounds, this mini-boss is actually the Egyptian god Ra. The implications on the Zelda lore this causes is extraordinary. Many questions arise on how Ganon gained control over the Egyptian god Ra, and why he would stick such a powerful lackey in anywhere but his main base. But honestly, this big of a discovery is way above my pay grade, so I probably shouldn't say more. The lead up to the boss room in the Wind Temple is very fitting. With the name Wind Temple and the final puzzle revolving all around wind, this room is very clever and super enjoyable to experience. However, other than the wind, the blades that slice through the ground as they are speeding towards Link are very contrasting to the nature aesthetic we see throughout the whole temple. This must be used as a metaphor to bring the observer's attention to how nature, no matter how beautiful, is ruthless and deadly. As we reach the final room and the floor starts to sink in sand, we notice we are now stuck in the sand pit of an antithesis worm, which is Molgera. This boss fight revolves around us exploiting Molgera's childish tendency to stick out its tongue to aggravate its prey. However, are we exploiting Molgera's tendencies, or are we misreading them? When Molgera has her tongue out, no sound is going out, but we clearly see movement of the tongue and her mouth. This must mean that Molgera and her race of worm have the ability to speak in a higher pitch than any human ear can hear. This means that when we see Molgera in this state, clearly she is communicating to her minions the plans of attack, giving her army a strategic advantage against Link. As we near the end of our journey, we finally realize that the Triumph Forks were a necessary component in stopping Ganon. Thus we set off to find the Triumph Forks, and as we do that, I might as well tell you what you couldn't have missed. The Savage Labyrinth is a very simple set of challenges. All you need to do is eliminate a group of enemies on each floor. This, after around 10 floors, allows you to receive a Triumph Fork. However, with such a name as the Savage Labyrinth, the lack of savagery is quite shocking. The battles you face are actually quite fair and organized, usually with enemies never flanking you and always spawning in front of you. This must mean that the Savage Labyrinth's prefix was switched with the Shark Island's prefix on accident late into development. This makes a lot of sense, especially considering the names Shark Labyrinth and Savage Island are way more fitting for each respectively. We can see this abundantly clear if we look at some of the fighting that goes down inside Shark Island. This fighting is extremely savage and way more unorganized than anything we see in the Savage Labyrinth. As we scour the ocean for Trinity Forks, we will come across many that are simply locked in boxes and tossed to the bottom of the sea. The question here is who did this, and for what reason was it done? Well, it may make sense Ganon did this to see if Link was a worthy opponent for battle. However, this falls apart when you realize his whole goal was to have the complete Trinity Fork in the first place. The only explanation for this is that Old Man Ho-Ho is the one who scattered these pieces himself. This would explain how he knows so much about the Triumph Forks and where they are located. Also possibly hinting towards Old Man Ho-Ho being a servant of Furore who scattered the pieces for her and appearing to Link to ensure he receives the Trinity Fork of Courage as per his destiny. As we enter the ghost ship, we have a sudden realization. The inside of this ship looks a lot like many of the submarines we have been infiltrating since the beginning of the game. While odd, This makes sense if you appeal to the mechanics of paranormal situations like this one. Clearly the ghosts were originally subordinates of Ganon, like every other set in the submarines. However, after an accident years ago, they all drowned and became ghosts. This slowly caused them to go insane, and while the interior of the submarine stayed the same, they slowly started having delusions about them all sailing on a pirate ship, causing the ghost ship Mirage to take shape. Bird's Peak Rock is one of the most infamous pieces of the Triumph Fork we come across. This is due to the one helm rock that is flying around the center of the rock formation. This helm rock is somehow able to dodge majority of the player's arrows shot at it with ease. While for years no one was able to figure out why, clearly this bird is a psychic and can predict where Link is going to shoot. In Link's Cabana, we find that there is a massive underground sewer system with many rooms and doors. This is extremely odd, especially considering this cabana was owned by Miss Marie, the kind teacher in Windfall Island. This sadly shines some light on Miss Marie, with it being clear to us that she used to perform many illegal acts inside the sewers of this cabana. Our only clues to why are the joy pendants. She must have been running a jewelry smuggling operation in the past and used this bunker for storing her joy pendant supply and hiding bodies of anyone who would get in her way. However, clearly she has moved past this life and wanted some joy pendants to have as a memory of her previous life of crime. After all the strife and all the Triumph Forks, we make it back to Sunken Hyrule. And as we witness Zelda being captured, we use all our brain power and deduce that we need to go save her. So after shattering a barrier and climbing a hill, we make it to Ganon's Tower. This final dungeon is extravagant, elegant, and I'm gonna tell you what you couldn't have missed one last time. The bottom floor of Ganon's Tower requires us to revisit multiple rooms that mirror dungeons we have faced so far, the first of which is Dragon Roost Cavern. This room for many players is very confusing. Many believe that you need the water jugs at the front of the room to complete this puzzle by creating obsidian. However, right when the player realizes you can utilize ice arrows to the same effect, the solution becomes a lot more clear, though this leaves a question. Why were the jugs there in the first place? Clearly, this was a rare case of Ganon being considerate to Link, leaving these water jugs here in the case Link got thirsty due to the heat of this room. The second room of this gauntlet is the Forbidden Woods, and other than bringing up our PTSD of Makar's near-death experience, this room is relatively easy, only requiring the Deku Leaf and a little platforming to complete. However, with us being mere steps from falling into an endless pit, this room is a metaphor for how we are surrounded by darkness as we fight to reach Ganon. The Earth Temples section is quite jarring, forcing you into a tight hallway with coffins with enemies on all sides. Similarly to the Forbidden Woods, this section is a metaphor, but this time, the hallway is attempting to exhibit how claustrophobic you would feel if you were standing in an elevator with Jalhalla. Finally, the last section of the basement is based off of the Wind Temple. This room is a little weird when compared to the others. This is due to the many electrical traps, the fan and the spikes, being present only in this room in Ganon's Tower. This must mean that Ganon sadly did not get his money up and could only afford an electricity plan for a singular room. We've made it past the basement and made it into the foot of the tower itself. This area, however, instantly bombards us with mysticism. This comes about with us finding mirrored rooms with slightly different features in each one. After further investigation, we find out that one leads to a way out of the tower and one leads further in. The fact the game gives you a way of escape clearly is a callback to Majora's Mask, when you use the Song of Time to escape your fate, and in Ocarina of Time during the escape sequence at the end of the game. After dealing with the mirror rooms, we come across Phantom Ganon. We have dealt with this mini-boss multiple times before, but this time we are dealing with him 7 times. These fights throughout the game have always felt as though they were missing something. Every fight with Phantom Ganon ends the exact same, with a single death sound. This fact has left many sad and depressed. However, after doing some digging, here for the first time, hear the unused Phantom Ganon death lines. As we finally catch up with Ganon, he instantly hides and starts controlling a massive puppet in his image to face us. This fight is very intense due to the urgency required to cut the puppet strings and succeed in shooting the light arrows at its weak spot before being overwhelmed. While it's clear the fight is referencing how Ganon has been a puppet master the whole game, this also shows that Ganon is truly terrified to face the hero, and hopes he can just dispose of Link indirectly to avoid taking a risk. After disposing of all of Ganon's devices and foiling his plan, Ganon now has nothing left to lose. He makes his decision and wants to change his fate by killing the hero instead of becoming another statistic to add to the Ganon death count. This fight is very one-sided in Ganon's favor, and I think if Link did not have Zelda by his side, Ganon's pure physical prowess would definitely leave Link outclassed. Even with the light arrows, Ganon learns how to avoid them with ease. However, Ganon is only human, and due to his bloodlust, tunnel-visioned and forgot that the mirror shield he hid inside the Earth Temple could be used as a conduit for the light arrow to travel through, ultimately leading to his demise. And while that's a good theory, clearly he lost due to still suffering from injuries from when Valoo burnt him to a crisp. And that is the end of what you couldn't have missed in the Wind Waker HD. If you enjoyed, you know what to do.